consider viewing the contributions and lobbying expenditures here through this lens. I think there is something expected in return for all this money. So the purpose of the gathering of all this information is to show the large amounts of money the natural gas industry spends on the Pennsylvania legislature in terms of lobbying and campaign contributions. The policy consequences of this, for example, the inability to pass a severance tax, the inability to get conventional drilling regs passed, the inability to get the Royalty Protection Act passed, let alone things like expanding renewable energy. To sort of discuss some of the problems in the current campaign finance laws and lobbying laws, and maybe discuss that allows this to happen, and maybe just discuss some recommended changes. We gathered a lot of data, but I think first want to give kudos to Common Cause and the conservation voters of Pennsylvania. They really did a lot of the initial work here. What we're going to do, and I do think the system is rigged. I think that when you consider the influence of the drilling industry and how it is difficult to get this stuff passed, it's certainly not a level playing field. So what we're going to do in the next 25 slides or so is talk about first the campaign finance findings we made, then the lobbyist disclosure findings we made, then the statement of financial interest findings we made, the consequences, and then some possible solutions. So what we found was last year the gas industry spent over $883,000. We did not report or count the individual contributions for the second half of 2016, so this number is understated. You'll see the Consol Energy was the biggest contributor to the legislature last year with 136,000 EQT and others behind them. And I think it's fair to say that most of these companies have a financial interest in the legislative outcome here as far as blocking a severance tax and blocking the conventional regulations and other issues they might have relating to fines that have been imposed upon them and other things they want and need. So they're sort of highly motivated to contribute to the legislature. As far as the monies received, Speaker Turzai, and I'll just stop at this point and say I like Michael Turzai. I think he's doing I really like the way he comports himself at the podium. I've said that to him many a time. So I have nothing personal against Mike. I hope he's not offended by this. But he was the main recipient in 2016 of natural gas industry's monies receiving. We looked at Chairman Marr of the Environmental Committee, and he received $20,000 this year from the natural gas industry, and we break it down. But I think an observation that Common Cause made in their report was when he was chairman of the Ag Committee in 2014, he got less than $2,000. But when he moved to be chairman of the Environmental Committee in 2015, he received over $23,000, and again 2016 over $20,000. And I think the point to be made is that contributions are to be made to people who have influence. And I think one of the most damaging things that Chairman Marr did as in his committee was when Senate Bill 792 moved through, which became Act 52, that canceled the conventional drilling regulations, and that eventually canceled the conventional drilling regulations, which really was bad public policy and really put the environment and public health in a worse position. Okay, and we've just covered campaign finance, and this is the lobbying portion. We found that there are 203 lobbyists working on the behalf of the gas industry, 203. And what we found was that just in 2016, they spent over $7 million. When you add up the totals on their reports, they spent over $7 million just this last year. But they've spent over $60 million in lobbying expenses, lobbying this legislature since 2007. I think that's startling. That's a lot of money. So we just wanted to focus on the Marcellus Shale Coalition. And I want to give you an idea of, this is their report. This is a complete report of the Marcellus Shale Coalition for the last quarter of 2015. And I think this is it. This is what they have to report to disperse almost $1 million. I think what's important here is how little it does disclose. It discloses the names of 4 lobbyists, 3 categories of expenditures, and just a broad listing of the subject matter. With this $1 million, there's no legislators here receiving gifts, indicates receiving gifts. There's no specific bill numbers that they've lobbied on. Just a broad category of gifts, which in this case was about, they indicated $585. It's one of the problems with our current lobbying law, how little they really have to report. I think, I think this points out the problem there is with regard to gift reporting. It's $80,000 worth of gifts, but there wasn't a single legislator's name listed on any of the lobbying reports of the entire industry. No legislator was named as receiving gifts. Where did the money go? I mean, that's the problem. And I think the problem is the reporting, rather the threshold requirements are simply just too high. So all of this $80,000 in gift giving just goes right under the radar. Right now, under current law, you don't have to report a gift if you're a principal, unless it's more than $250 per year, and you don't have to report it. Transportation, lodging, and hospitality if it's more than $650 a year. Not a single legislator's name appeared on any lobbyist report for the year 2016. Nor did any bill number. This just underscores the same point. We looked at the financial statements and financial statements, just in case you don't know, every public official has to file a statement of financial interest, which has to record the gifts that person has received. And of the 253 legislators who filed, only 5 reported receiving gifts, and they only totaled $80,000. So in 2015, almost $70,000 were reported in gifts on the lobbying reports, but only $8,000 show up on the statement of financial interest. So the problems with the current law is thresholds are just too high. We now want to move into the consequences. What's the consequences of all this undue influence of the natural gas industry on the legislature? We remain the only major gas-producing state without a severance tax. It's something we just should do. And according to the Department of Revenue, this current budget we're in, 16-17, we're losing about $153 million in revenues. And that's factoring in what we are getting from the impact fee. We're losing $153 million this year. Over time, we have lost since fiscal year 11-12. It's well over $1 billion, because I think the PA Budget and Policy Center said it was $1.2 billion. And I think the second thing is the health and safety. The conventional drilling regulations, these are just really basic stuff. I mean, these are just some of the highlights. Just requiring conventional drillers before they drill to do a pre-drilling review. It's just basic stuff. These regulations were found to be in the public interest by our Independent Regulatory Review Commission. They have overwhelming public support. The comments were overwhelmingly in support of them. But year after year, they're blocked. I mean, it happens in the fiscal code. Year after year, these conventional drilling regs are, and that's important. It's just basic stuff. And I guess from the drilling industry perspective, it's better to give $1 million in lobbying and just save the cost it would to comply with this or pay the severance tax. I've beat my head against the wall trying to expand the alternative energy portfolio standard. The lobbying interests against it are just too hard, too difficult to deal with. the royalty protection bill. Some of these people have been getting negative checks. You know, gas company says you owe us money, or checks in the amount of 13 cents. And I see it stall. Right before it gets to a floor vote, and it's so predictable. And I just want to say to these landowner association people, don't you get it? Don't you get it? The system's rigged. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the gas industry just has a control over this building. I think that the lobbying law that we passed in 2006, it was the appearance of reform without the reality. What needs to change? I mean, you need contribution limits. What you've seen being given is just way too high. It's way too high. We're all humans, and when you get a contribution of $20,000, I think it's more to expect of a person that they're not going to react to that in some way. We have a really poor search capabilities. Now, for example, you know, if you're a legislator, you might have to file 6, 7 reports in the course of a year. You know, your first cycle, second cycle, third cycle, and so forth. When you use the Department of State's site, you have to stick in one cycle. You cannot, the search does not allow you to go between cycles. So, for example, if you wanted to, picking on Speaker Turzai again, if you wanted to find out how much, let's say, range resources gave to him over the 5 election cycles, you'd have to go through 35 different reports. And that just, in this state of computer technology, there's just no reason. There's no reason for that. Lobbying disclosure. I mean, I think here's what I've observed in the last 25 years, the strategy of lobbyists. You know, I mean, they want to become your friends. They want to take you to dinner, take you to the ball game, you know, give you cigars, what have you. They want to become your friends because, you know, when they need something, when they need to vote on an amendment, it's like, come on, can you help me out here? Because, you know, we're friends, and friends help out friends, right? That's wrong. That's the wrong role for lobbyists. Lobbyists have a very legitimate role, a constitutionally protected role to petition their government, but they should not be our friends. They should be strictly providers of information. I think it's entirely appropriate that we should not be receiving any gifts from lobbyists. The total gift ban is what we should be striving for. But short of that, first penny disclosure, which means anything a lobbyist gifts you has to be reported. The bill in 2006 did not change the culture in Harrisburg. And to do that, constituents need to know, I think, and I said this in my floor speech in 2006, which lobbyist is giving what gift to what legislator for what bill. Those 4 things. You could start to tie gifts to legislative actions. That might cause legislators to get stung a bit in newspaper articles and may change the culture in Harrisburg a little bit. That's the end of the presentation.